Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli police raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem for a second straight night, attacking and forcibly removing Palestinians who were praying during the holy month of Ramadan. Police deployed stun grenades and fired rubber-coated steel bullets at worshippers. Earlier today, Israeli police escorted dozens of Israeli settlers into the Al-Aqsa courtyards. Meanwhile, witnesses say Palestinian men under the age of 40 are being barred from entering the mosque. Rockets were fired from the occupied Gaza Strip in response to the latest attack. On Wednesday, Israeli jets struck Gaza following another rocket fire in protest of the raid. Demonstrations took place in Gaza, Turkey, Jordan, and elsewhere as international officials condemned the Israeli attacks on Al-Aqsa and warned against further acts of violence as Passover and Ramadan overlap. This is Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations.
The Israeli occupying authorities has no right whatsoever to tell people when to pray and when not to pray.
New research finds ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica melted at a far faster rate than previously believed at the end of the last ice age, raising fears global sea level rise could rapidly accelerate this century as modern-day glaciers collapse due to human activity. The report in the journal Nature found the Norwegian continental ice shelf retreated by as much as 2,000 feet per day. The findings came just days after another study in Nature found melting ice could soon cause deep ocean currents around Antarctica to collapse, with dire effects on the oceans and Earth's climate that could last centuries. The collapse could play out on a scale of just decades or even years. Saudi Arabia and Iran have agreed to reopen embassies, resume official visits, and facilitate visas for their citizens during talks in Beijing. This follows a China-brokered deal last month between the two nations to restore diplomatic ties following a 7-year dispute. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron is also in Beijing, meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Macron stressed Xi's key role in helping reach a diplomatic end to the Ukraine war.
L'agression russe en Ukraine a porté un coup à cette stabilité.
The Russian aggression in Ukraine has dealt a blow to this stability. It ended decades of peace in Europe. I know I can count on you, moreover, under the two principles I have just mentioned, to bring Russia to its senses and everyone to the negotiating table.
President Macron also said France and China agree that nuclear weapons should be excluded from the Ukraine war. China vowed to take unspecified actions after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and a bipartisan congressional delegation in California Wednesday. Speaking from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, McCarthy urged the Biden administration to expedite arms deliveries to Taiwan. President Tsai also spoke to reporters.
In a discussion with congressional leaders this morning, I reiterated Taiwan's commitment to defending the peaceful status quo. I also highlighted a belief, which President Reagan championed, that to preserve peace, we must be strong.
Ahead of the meeting, a Chinese aircraft carrier group was spotted in the waters off Taiwan's coast. China views any official visits or meetings with Taiwan as a challenge to its sovereignty. Former Vice President Mike Pence said he will not appeal a federal court's ruling requiring him to testify before a grand jury investigating the January 6 U.S. Capitol insurrection. Donald Trump's legal team could try to appeal the decision. This comes after a D.C. appeals court rejected an emergency request by Trump to block former aides from testifying before the grand jury, citing executive privilege. Those officials include former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former White House advisor Stephen Miller, and Ken Cuccinelli, who was Trump's acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. This all comes as Trump faces an April 25th court date here in New York, where a civil suit brought by author E. Jean Carroll alleges Trump raped her in a dressing room at a department store in the mid-1990s. Indiana Republican Governor Eric Holcomb signed a bill Wednesday banning gender-affirming care for children. The new law, which takes effect July 1st, will require trans youth who are currently transitioning to stop taking medication by the end of the year. 12 states now have such laws on the books after Idaho Republican Governor Brad Little signed a similar bill Tuesday evening. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers in Kansas Wednesday successfully overrode Democratic Governor Laura Kelly's veto of a bill barring transgender athletes from competing on K-12 and college sports teams that match their gender identities. In Texas, the Justice Department has reached a tentative $144 million settlement with relatives and victims of the 2017 mass shooting at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, which left 26 people dead. Victims sued the U.S. Air Force after it failed to report the shooter's history of violence to the FBI, which should have prevented the gunman from obtaining the assault rifle and other weapons used in the attack. The settlement came as students at more than 100 schools walked out of their classrooms Wednesday in a nationwide protest against gun violence. The walkouts included students in Uvalde, Texas, and Denver, Colorado, and Nashville, Tennessee, just some of the places across the U.S. where at least 74 people have been killed or injured by guns in schools so far this year. In Nashville, faith leaders held a peaceful sit-in protest at the state capitol inside the office of Republican Speaker Cameron Sexton. They were calling on the Tennessee legislature to abandon its plan to expel 3 state legislators today who supported students demanding gun safety protests. House Republicans, who hold a supermajority in Tennessee, are voting on the expulsions today. The legislators represent Tennessee's 3 largest cities. Only 2 other lawmakers have been ousted from the Tennessee House Representatives since the Civil War. To see our interview with Tennessee State Representative Justin Jones, visit democracynow.org. North Carolina Democratic State Representative Tricia Cotham announced Wednesday she's switching parties and will become a Republican. Her move gives a veto-proof supermajority to Republicans in the State House as they attempt to ram through new abortion restrictions, anti-LGBTQ laws, and other measures. In Wisconsin, Republican lawmakers are already talking about impeaching the newly elected state Supreme Court Justice Janet Protasiewicz after her decisive win in Tuesday's election. Her victory gave Wisconsin's high court a liberal majority for the first time in 15 years and renewed hopes that Wisconsin's 1849 abortion ban can be reversed. This week, State Senator Dewey Strobel told the New York Times impeachment was not impossible. In Nevada, a man is facing murder charges following a car ramming that targeted a Food Not Bombs distribution site in Reno. 55-year-old Michelle Jardine was identified as the dead victim, while 2 others were critically injured. David Turner admitted to intentionally attacking the 3. A new report by the Maryland Attorney General's office finds nearly 160 Catholic priests and other members of the Archdiocese of Baltimore raped or sexually abused more than 600 people over a span of 8 decades. Its authors called the breadth and depravity of the abuse astonishing. Just hours after the report was released Wednesday, Maryland's State Senate passed the Child Victims Act, which removes a statute of limitations to allow more survivors to sue people who sexually abuse them. Governor Wes Moore promised to sign the bill into law. The Maryland Catholic Conference opposed the bill and has signaled plans to challenge it in court. And in the Mediterranean, Doctors Without Borders says it rescued 440 migrants after responding to a distress call in rough seas off the coast of Malta Tuesday. The passengers were from Syria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Somalia, and Sri Lanka, 30 of them children. Meanwhile, rights groups are condemning the UK government's latest anti-migrant move after it rented a massive barge where it says 500 asylum seekers can be housed while they wait for their cases to proceed. This is the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
We're bringing forward alternative sites, like indeed the barge that we've announced today, that will save us money and indeed reduce pressure on hotels, all part of our plan to stop the boats. We're also putting through Parliament a new law which will ensure that if you arrive here illegally, you will not have the ability to stay. We will be able to detain you and then swiftly remove you to your own country if it's safe, or a third country alternative like Rwanda.
Amnesty International UK slammed the plan as ministerial cruelty. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.